All right, there we go.
Okay, thank you very much. I call the meeting to order. First thing I want to do is go around the table and give quick introductions. You may have already done so while we were out, but if not, okay, good. That would be helpful then. Hello, I am Eric Frisch. I am chair of the Corporation.
I'm Eric too, but I'm the city.
That's right.
I am Brian Mitchell. I am staff for the Rochester Land Bank, and I work for the Division of Real Estate for the city.
Paul Scuderi, Executive Director of the Land Bank and Director of Real Estate for the city.
James Smith, a member of the Land Bank Board and also the Chief of Staff for Rochester City Council.
Cindy Castillo, admin for the Rochester Land Bank.
Maritza Mejia, project manager of the Land Bank.
Cosmic Reed, a board member of the Land Bank.
Andrew Ferry, municipal attorney for the city law department and counsel to the Land Bank.
Carol Wheeler, vice chair of the Land Bank and manager of housing.
Charter Johnson Thomas, generational wealth program manager at ESL.
Jamu Twana, SVP and Director of Community Impact at ESL.
John Fornoff, treasurer of the Land Bank, city treasurer.
Failed to mention my day job as deputy commissioner. All right, then we will, without further ado, proceed into much anticipated presentation. John, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having us. And I know a couple of you have gotten a version, essentially this version of the presentation, but really excited here today to yes, give an overview. I'll do my best to move through it. But the Land Bank, frankly, you know, to get to the punchline has been on the radar of every version of strategy brainstorming. We have a consultant, which I'll mention, that came in and, you know, hey, does Rochester have a land bank? They could be an ideal partner. Always comes up. And so I'm excited to finally be here to share with you all what we're up to and maybe begin or really continue conversation around what opportunities might lie ahead to collaborate. So yeah, without further ado, I will jump in. And also, again, because some of you heard it, feel free to interrupt, ask questions, focus on particular areas as I walk through. Happy to do that to make this as valuable as possible for you all. So, all right. So this initiative, you'll notice, although I work for ESL, this generational wealth through homeownership initiative is an initiative ESL is seeding, but really is envisioned as a greater Rochester community initiative. So there's no ESL branding. It's not, you know, a program of ESL. We are making an initial investment, but really hoping to establish a program that'll be broadly shared and participated in within our community. So I'll go through an introduction of what we're doing, a little bit of history, what we learned, the opportunity as we've identified it and learned, and then a commitment that ESL has made to, again, kind of catalyze what we hope will be a broader collaborative initiative. So first, the bottom line, the goal is to address the staggering Black-white homeownership gap in Greater Rochester, and it's, you know, similar numbers in the city of Rochester. Homeownership rate overall is about 73% in Greater Rochester for white households, and the community overall for Black households is 33%. So that's a 40 percentage point gap, not 40% gap, but 40 percentage point. That, you know, 33 is obviously less than half of the 73% rate. And that gap is larger than the national gap. Nationally, the gap is 30%. Essentially, the white homeownership rate is pretty consistent. We're a little higher, but consistent with the nation. But the Black homeownership rate nationally is 43%. So in Rochester, a place where affordable home, we're known for affordable home ownership, and it's what makes us a great place to live. We underperform in particular for home ownership for Black households. And so the goal of this initiative is to increase home ownerships, particularly focus on Black households and really using that as a step towards addressing generational wealth. So which, you know, before we launched this, my day job, we've been working in philanthropy. As you all know, we invest in multiple areas. You know, name the vertical and social impact. There's a dramatic disparity between Black and white households. Home ownership and generational wealth in particular, we're interested in as a root cause, kind of foundational driver of those disparities in education and health, et cetera. Hence, targeted focus on addressing generational wealth and home ownership being a key driver of generational wealth, being the focus of this strategy. Kind of how we at ESL got there started off really at a Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative meeting where some learning, Shane Wiegand, a local 4th grade teacher, start to dig up and uncover the local specific history of redlining and segregation in our community, right? We experience, no matter where you live, chances are you experience a segregated neighborhood one way or the other. You know, a lot of neighborhoods, all your neighbors, almost all are white, or almost all your neighbors are people of color, is the way our community is sorted and organized. But this history and the story helped us to understand why. That's not an accident. It wasn't because people of color prefer to live by each other and white people like to live by each other. There were specific policies, real estate industry, banking industry, et cetera, that created that reality. And so in light of our, at ESL, purpose to help our community thrive and prosper, we had already been committed to addressing quality affordable housing. We explored the question, can we make a difference on this specific racial divide in our community, and got authorization from senior management, the board of directors, and ultimately invested and hired the Boston Consulting Group to put together a robust investigation and strategy to first answer the question, is there something that could meaningfully be done, right? We didn't want to just do something to say we are doing the right thing. If it wasn't feasible, we wouldn't be where we are today, but we found a feasible strategy to drive towards ultimate goal of closing that gap. And over the course of a decade or so, we intend to make meaningful progress in reducing it and putting us on track to close it. So before we get to the strategy, a little bit of what we learned. So nationally, again, homeownership represents 40 to 70% of household wealth. Where it exists in households of color is more on the higher end, that 70%. That is for all Americans. Homeownership is consistently an entry point for wealth building. For many American households, they built upon that home ownership wealth to get 401ks and other second homes, et cetera. If you look at the profile, and the FDIC does a profile of wealth across America every couple of years. For people of color, 70% for those who have wealth, home ownership is a critical piece of wealth, and just overall homeowners' net worth is 46 times the net worth of those who rent, again, representing a critical factor with respect to the wealth divide in our country and in our community specifically. I mentioned that this 40 percentage point gap, 10% higher than the national gap, so a particular challenge in Greater Rochester. Again, this is Monroe County, Greater Rochester, not only the city of Rochester, but I know from conversation with some of you, the numbers are similar within the city in terms of approximately a 40 percentage point gap, which I'll say as a note, I had a conversation with former Mayor Bill Johnson about this, and he noted that 40% is worse than it was when he was mayor. It was bad, it was 30 something, but he was anyway, sadly, unfortunate to hear that it was even a bigger gap than it was then. So it's also worse, or essentially the same as it was till 1968. And 1968 is important because that is when the Fair Housing Act was passed. So up until 1968, it was legal. It was the law of the land to segregate, to discriminate based on race. But in 1968, again, not accidental, that was the year Martin Luther King was assassinated. This was a year that our country overall, in theory, made the commitment that we were no longer going to accept separate but equal. We were no longer going to enforce segregation in our communities. The laws were passed to support equality, yet the data shows that we made zero progress since then in terms of the homeownership gap between Black and white households, zero progress. And other key factors along the way, FHA, VA loans, and you all know those are among the programs that help to make homeownership possible generally for Americans. That's 73% homeownership rate today. At the in the 1930s, less than half of all Americans own homes. So the United States American developed specific policies to invest in suburbs, to make homeownership possible, such as backing the 30-year mortgage, which happened for the first time in 1934, the GI Bill, VA loans, all of these were government-backed programs to enable homeownership, to enable the growth of the middle class. Each of those programs specifically excluded Black households, and the results are the data that I've shared in the gap that we experience today. So it wasn't accidental, it wasn't, you know, formal policies, and the exclusion of those policies have led to the disparity we see today. And further today, Black consumers face higher application rejection rates in the mortgage industry. They lack trust in financial lenders. So that trust piece is something not often talked about, but it's critical, and that results in fewer applications. There's a sense of, after being discriminated against across generations, at some point, a lot of folks give up and don't see homeownership or other things in their future. And also have lower homeownership rates than white peers of similar incomes and education levels. Sometimes when we talk about segregation and these disparities, people say, oh, well, it's because the city schools are so bad is why, you know, Black people don't live in the suburbs, or they don't own homes. But this shows, and this is national data, we've got to get the Rochester specific data, but the top 3 bars are showing home ownership, Black home ownership in orange, white home ownership in white by income. So that the very top bar is up to 80% of area median income. And I'm sure you all are familiar with area median income, and almost all affordable housing programs are for that market, those that are low to moderate income, i.e. below 80% of the AMI. But if you see, for those with that similar income band, there's still a huge gap, even when controlling for income, 60% homeownership rate among whites versus 32% among Blacks. And even as we go up to the higher income range, the homeownership gap persists or between Black and white. So income, yes, is a factor, isn't the only factor. The education piece is the one that really shocks me, that even for white households whose education level is only high school or less, we see a 70% homeownership rate versus 30% for Black households. And then with college educated white households, 77% makes sense, but 56% for college educated Black households doesn't seem so logical. So yes, income, yes, education are factors, but doesn't explain the disparity. Before I get into this one, I'll just kind of acknowledge, as we developed this strategy, in particular working with BCG, we had to make some trade-offs. This is a business strategy essentially to try to move these numbers. And one critical trade-off, and we didn't take it lightly, was to focus specifically on Black households. There are other segments of our community that experience a disparate homeownership rate, Latino, for example, and others relative to white households. But for the sake of starting somewhere and being committed to actually move the needle, again, not trying to do something that feels like a good thing to do, but to really kind of move the numbers, we're focusing specifically on Black households. And even within Black households, those households that are ready for homeownership or on the cusp of being ready for homeownership. So this is not an anti-poverty program. We know poverty is real in our community and a real challenge, and we still have philanthropy, or ESL has philanthropy that'll continue to work on that. This is to address those folks that are ready, i.e. technically have enough income to own a home. Though, you know, those in that bar where their peers, their white peers, have 70, 80% chances of owning homes, yet they're not there. So how can we help those folks that are dealing with just a challenge of a competitive housing market, the intimidation of not having peers with, or parents with the support getting through that process, and those that are on the cusp are those who maybe have stable income but could use support, increased income, or maybe have sufficient income but not sufficient credit. So these are the target market for this initiative to get more of these ready and on the cusp households to homeownership. And in total, it's about, and this is Monroe County numbers, across the city and the county, about 7,300 ready and on the cusp households. I think the breakdown is similar in the city, is about 4,000 of those in the city, and about 3,000 of those are in Monroe County outside of the city. And so the gist of this strategy is to, over the course of 10 years, to work to move 5,000 Black renter households that are ready or on the cusp to homeownership. So that's our, that's the opportunity as we see it. Just noting the importance of choice. So redlining and segregation limited choices for Black households. Unfortunately, many affordable housing efforts, including the ones that we all support, have reinforced segregated demographics over the years, where we have programs that are for lower moderate income, and we cite them in lower moderate income areas. We unfortunately double down sometimes on income segregation and racial segregation. So for this initiative, we want to prioritize supporting Black home buyers to purchase wherever they choose. If they want to choose, purchase in the city or in a predominantly Black neighborhood, great. But we also want to create opportunities in suburban and other neighborhoods that have that frankly generally avoid affordable housing and programs like this one in our community. So the gist of the commitment, and again, like I said, I get excited going into this, but just to walk through, the key goal is to empower generational wealth. Homeownership is the vehicle, but ultimately we really want to make a difference for the households that we impact. That will be a generational change and help to spread prosperity, equity, et cetera, in our community. We want to make a transformational investment. So ESL's foundational commitment is $100 million over the course of 10 years to drive this work. $100 million won't be enough to get all of the 5,000. We'll need to leverage that up by 2 or 3 times to really get to the scale that we seek here. Hence the meaningful collaboration with partners like the Land Bank, like the City of Rochester, but also other financial institutions. We've reached out to Canandaigua National Bank and M&T and others with a stake in our local community. So that, again, this is not a program to promote ESL. And we want to work towards a clear mission, which is, bottom line, a much more integrated greater Rochester community where we see a meaningful presence of Black middle class, Black homeowners with the stability and frankly, all the benefits that owning a home brings to folks in the greater Rochester area to make this a great place to live, work, and worship, and ultimately to reach an impactful goal to move towards closing the gap. Over the course of 10 years, that 5,000 will get us about 30% of the gap. But if we are successful after almost 60 years of no progress to really reduce that gap by 30%, we'll feel confident that we're learning, we're figuring out some of the things that need to change to ultimately end the gap. So how we want to go about doing it, and we're just, next year, we'll really be into strategies, but some of the ways we want to focus on is demand, so supporting home buyers themselves. The supply side, again, this is where we hope the Land Bank can be a partner and perhaps in many ways, but the tight supply of homes impacts the entry point affordability for any home buyer. So that's a critical limiter, frankly, of scale in this issue. The value as well, supporting existing homeowners to stay in their homes, supporting existing homeowners to be able to make repairs and sustain homeownership, as well as recognizing that some of our historic or areas where we do have a concentration of Black homeownership, the home values do not appreciate at the same rates as some of our suburban communities. So we'll consider place-based investments to help address those situations. And so again, so just emphasizing the importance of collaboration. This is something that, again, we're seeding and, proud to be a part of ESL taking the action to make this seed investment, but we really can't do it alone. And the goal is to really bring in partners that will share this commitment to really drive results at scale with respect to closing the Black-white homeownership gap. And we've got, and you all have in the handout in front of you, a summary as well as a link to the website where we're collecting suggestions of partnerships, et cetera. And you can feel free to reference those there. So forgive me, I spoke fast, so that's the end of the presentation, but Ty and I will be happy to hear any reactions, suggestions, and even specific projects that you guys have got cooking up and waiting to ask us to to partner on would be great too. So.
Appreciate that. It was a great presentation. Had the opportunity to get maybe a review and an opportunity to talk to you about some of the areas that you've done already. And open it up to the floor here.
You said reaction?
Yeah. Would it be helpful maybe to talk about
Some of the things that we're doing.
Yeah.
We currently are very close to getting our direct to homeowner program. So because of the type of properties that we're able to acquire, they all need significant work, it's a significant investment. So we have been, over the course of years, partnering with organizations that have already been doing that with the city. So we have invested in Rochester program, we have invested in Habitat for Humanity rehabilitation program. We are now partnering with the CDFI out of Syracuse, home headquarters, to provide a mortgage product that is specifically for purchasers of land bank properties. Who would be purchasing a land bank property that does need rehab. We're investing the substances that we can to stabilize it. And then this is an acquisition we have mortgage that would hopefully cover the balance. Right now, we still have, we're pretty flush, so we can maybe do a little more than we have been, but that is certainly an area where additional funds are always needed, particularly the June homeowner, who's, not coming equity somewhere else. We are also, we just briefly, Eric, started thinking about one of the issues about wealth building within the city is the value of the home, where you are, whether it will appreciate. And the idea that the subsidy that we tend to have access to must be low to moderate income purchasers. So if there were, that is not actually a characteristic of the recent state land bank funding opportunities. But if you add any federal money, that's always the case. So there's currently a lot of money relative to that is potentially available for the state in a competitive fashion, where there could be some of that flexibility if we could identify other sources to invest in the rehabilitation of properties to a level that perhaps might make it outside of the range of what someone in affordable housing situation would be interested in. But that kind of partnership where you're layering funds as we're able to do affordable housing might also be an opportunity. I was going to bring it up, but I was going to bring it up in an email because it's not exactly, but I can make the argument. So we have many of the properties within the city, not just single family homes. And everybody's very excited about the double program because the idea is someone buy a home and then they can generate income. And that's instantly what those tend to be very challenging. I mean, being a landlord is challenging. It is. So the land bank does and can acquire multifamily homes. Our idea was to use those, rather than selling them to investors, use those as an opportunity to build generational wealth. So current homeowners within the city of Rochester would have the opportunity to purchase rehabilitated multifamily structures and become landlords. So the idea would be affordable people within the low to moderate income level who have been able to purchase a home would then have the opportunity to acquire the type of generational wealth that lasts more than one generation by investing in property that they could then rent. So we are in the process of the actual rehabilitation of some of the multifamily homes that we have started, but that is, I mean, some of those things about why, even when you own a home, that your wealth does not increase at the same rate. Part of it is your home isn't worth as much as you buy. Part of it is your neighborhood doesn't, you know, I mean, it's so appraisal values, all of that, but also, just because you could get an FHA loan doesn't mean the bank's going to help you invest in this business of being a homeowner, you know, a landlord, and investing it that way. So some of these things where we would, you know, parlay, or you can get a home equity loan into it. If you have the funds yourself, because you are now, you know, investing yourself, that is where that exponential growth comes. And if we start for people who are already at that low to moderate income level, that's where you see the growth.
New construction.
We are doing new construction. The state has the affordable homeownership program, which the city is taking advantage of. Great. To a great extent with the block program, which is, you know, different parts of the city. The land bank has made a affordable homeownership program application that includes both single family homes and both attached and detached single family. So they're all within a specific geographic area. They're all going to be built to the same quality as the by the block contractor. You know, the investment in the quality of the home will be there, whether it's an attached or detached. But it's another format or another option for people in the low to moderate income, and actually an option in particular for people at the lower end, which may not be, but at the lower end of that income purchasing bracket, who can get into a home that it is their home that they own, that they creates you know, housing stability, and also creates equity. At a level that maybe they would be waiting for this to be. So that is our aim with that particular project.
Is that Josana? Is that the Josana?
Yeah.
So that was.
That's where we are now, but I'm sure we could come up with some more.
Yeah, I'm curious, you know, starting to, was on one hand, volume, and I know I may have had this conversation with, and probably have the notes somewhere else. But I want to get a sense of how many of those, say, property, for all those programs, properties you all are getting available and making available, say, on an annual basis. So.
So there have been some changes
Okay.
as to how we acquire property. We are now going to be in a position to purchase properties at the tax foreclosure auction while competing against other bidders. The city has made a provision where they will be offering the land bank some accommodation, which should have an impact on the number of properties that we can acquire. We also have grant funding available from public sources that is hopeful kind of mitigate the effect, but we don't quite know how many properties we're going to be able to acquire versus maybe the 30 or so that we have been acquiring from the tax auction. Although it's got to be more than last year, because there were very few last year that were just that admitted to the auction as well. So in the past, we had been acquiring maybe 30 at the tax auction, which is where we acquire most of our properties. It is very difficult to move quickly enough in this market to acquire properties on the private market. We have had interaction with third-party tax lien purchasers who, you know, if they are not able to sell a property, sell it to us occasionally. But the volume of properties, I can't really give a estimate of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very speculative. People are seeing this out there, people keep paying their taxes. Which is a good thing, that they fall on our list of possible acquisitions.
Okay.
I know the city treasurer is happy with that, and they should be, because that's what we want, but it takes an opportunity. Wanted to ask you one thing, about the ESL's position as far as property status goes, discussion, the statement will lead to it. We had a program that we were trying for a while, not the ground too much, but where we would take a property that was occupied at the time of acquisition, whether or not we knew it was occupied, usually we didn't know that. But we would work with the individuals who lived there to see if they wanted to acquire the property and become a property owner. And it was a two-family, you know, that's the oldest, you know, wealth building strategy right there, right? You live in one half, the other side pays the rent, covers most of the expenses, you got an asset at the end of the day. We were able to turn a couple of those occupants into homeowners. Didn't get a great response from the other multitude of properties that we tried.
Right.
But that is something that I still think it's a viable option. We try our hardest not to acquire properties that are, I'm just. But in the event that we did acquire an occupied property, what's ESL's position of being involved with a property that's occupied?
Yeah, I think we wouldn't, I'd say we wouldn't be strongly opposed to being involved, but we won't pretend to have the expertise to support, you know, so that gets into that area of, you know, depending on income, the general situation, if someone is a renter, are they on the journey to homeownership, or they just this thing happened to their house and we're pitching it, and if the latter is the case, again, there's a lot of work to get in them to be ready to be a sustainable homeowner. We gladly support someone who does have that expertise or who can help make that happen. But we are part of the gist of the strategy, and the focus is trying to be frankly realistic about like who, you know, where are those real likely opportunities to convert folks to homeownership, as opposed to things that will be, you know, a much more of a long shot. That said, frankly, the numbers, we've got the 5,000 or so, which we'd love to move, that are ready and on the cusp. If there's a program that works for those that are deeper income and gets them to stable homeownership, that's also awesome. That's even better. Again, we don't have that expertise. We love to see somebody else do it. We know it's easier said than done. So we, as you know, certainly, you know, will be thoughtful in terms of investing in, you know, like we don't want to invest in dreams, you know, versus something that's working. But if something that works in that space, we'll absolutely have to be part of the solution to ultimately close the gap, which is our ultimate goal. It's just a matter of, we're not planning as part of this to be building, you know, huge programs to help support social services to get people far from where they are today. So.
As the city treasurer and also as the treasurer of the land bank, I can tell you our current in our annual tax foreclosure auction, there are you know, quite a number of current homeowners that could get caught up into that process. And as Paul said, the land bank here, we don't typically like to focus on owner occupieds. We're sort of intentionally not going after those properties with tax foreclosure, but this is a group that deserves a lot more attention in terms of how do we help, because, you know, the land bank can tell you in any given year, you know, who those properties are. We can separate the list and say, these are the owner occupieds, or these are the renters, or these are the LLC, you know, owners, with tenant landlord situations. But the owner occupieds that are unable to stay in their homes for financial reasons, you know, there's not many places to go, right? And the land bank is not taking those properties. The city has payment plan opportunities for folks, but that only goes to a certain amount of years and a certain max terms associated with that. You know, and a lot of folks fall on hard times. So this gets to the retention issue, not necessarily new homeowners, but you don't want to see that percentage continue to go down. So you need to retain what's already there. And how do you do that? You need to shore up this group. And that's sort of a group that kind of falls through the cracks, I think, typically in these conversations.
No, agree 100% and absolutely interested in finding, again, ways to help support that group that, you know, among the buckets of value, buckets of sustaining homeownership, that's exactly it. And, you know, you all know Eric works with me and is a veteran of the homeownership space, and he's told me about years of working with programs and across our community that are homeownership programs, and they're counting these hundreds of new homeowners that are getting into the homes, yet the overall homeownership is still going down because people are also losing homes. So all that to say, we're very much interested in, and we haven't, our first kind of strategy is going to be a home buyer grant, but we're absolutely looking for partners who we can work with to, one, to understand like the loss, like how many folks are losing their homes to foreclosure, whether it be tax or bank, et cetera. And then what can be done to address it. We know Housing Council, others have foreclosure prevention programs, but we'd love to help.
We have a list, we give people, it only goes so far, and now the dollars typically aren't available, and it's the idea of retention, right? And the land bank, you know, is looking for certain types of properties and may or may not be, you know, doing anything with those, with that group.
Yeah. No, that we'd be very much interested, and that I was gonna say there, you all probably seen the book, I think it's Just Action, the one that so there was Just Cause and Just Action that, the father and daughter, was that? Rothstein, thank you, that the Rothstein wrote. There was an example, not of a land bank, I think, but it was a community land trust, maybe in Minnesota or somewhere, whose strategy was exactly that. They, you know, found folks that were in trouble with tax, and they purchased the homes and worked with them to kind of stabilize the cost. That seemed, you know, like a great strategy. But absolutely, I think that's the part of the challenge I'd love to learn more about, even if it's something, you know, starting with, again, the visibility of those homeowners that are facing those challenges, and we can maybe collaborate with some of the existing agencies to do more. We have a direct cash grant program, which we partner with the Housing Council, and I know they use that along with their foreclosure prevention work to help people with emergencies. And when I say we, that's the ESL, the current foundation. But we'd be absolutely interested in programs that help address that.
Because when it gets to the auction, you know, if they're not able to stay and retain, and if the land bank is not bidding, someone's gonna buy it, and it's typically gonna be a landlord or an LLC with an inventory that's already existing. It's the same old. Yeah, great.
We know where that's going in that case, so yeah, great point. All right, well, I didn't want to cut anything short since I showed up, a few of us showed up late, so I'm glad we got a good conversation with there. Really appreciate you coming in and giving that presentation, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, thanks. I was gonna say, how can we stay in touch? And yeah, thanks so much. And I realized I didn't bring my cards in.
I have had, what is her name? Heather?
Heather.
Oh, Heather,
Heather.
oh,
So
perfect. Okay, that's one whose contacts he really worked. Thanks so much. Yeah, and again, thank you guys so much for having us, and we appreciate it. And thanks for all the work you're doing. Those programs sound exciting. I'm looking forward to learning more as they roll out, and learning how we can be helpful and partner on those. So.
Thank you. Okay, so jumping into the rest of the agenda, I realize that we probably need to elect a secretary for the day. So do we have a nomination?
Or volunteers,
Self-nomination, as it were?
someone who's not another officer, that would be.
Volunteer.
That would be 1, 2.
Sure. Sure.
Okay, there's
Only
a
a
motion to
Yeah.
appoint Eric Van Dusen as secretary for the day.
Oh, so Eric, perfect.
Oh, wrote down
Even better.
whatever the correct language is. Okay, moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye, motion carries. I am gonna jump out, but we need to approve the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to take a look, and are there any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, do we have a motion for approval of the minutes?
So you-
Moved and seconded.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. And I will hand over the reins to Vice Chairperson Wheeler and apologize that I have to leave, but I know you're in good hands. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go right.
Well, you know, I know we started a little bit late,
Really quick.
and we have a couple of resolutions to get to. Are there any board members that need to leave immediately at 4? Still give us a form, okay, I'm sure we'll move quickly, so I understand. Times.
All right. Resolution number 24, to authorize acquisition of properties. The tax for police officers.
So this is slightly different than it's happened in previous years. There was not a separate list of renovated properties we authorized. To authorize our potential purchase of any property that is in the tax foreclosure auction up to a certain dollar figure, as will be including bidding competitively against all of them. We have set that dollar figure at 600,000. We just have grant funds that can support it. And that would be 600,000 spent less the tax lien that the city has agreed to cancel for properties for 5 next year. So hopefully that will help us acquire more property.
That's great.
But that was the biggest.
We have the person identified who will actually be doing the bidding.
Yes.
Okay,
But we're not telling.
we're not telling. you. Thank you.
They'll be
Very
in the crowd, they'll be in the crowd bidding with the rest of the crowd.
Person identified already. All right, and we get a motion to approve resolution number 24. And moved in second. Are there any questions? Are we prepared to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Resolution number 24 stands approved. Resolution number 25, to authorize acceptance of proposal to rehabilitate 5 properties in the land bank inventory.
So these are the properties that we put out in RFP in September. These are properties we had initially thought could be incorporated in the city's existing and well-functioning contract services rehab program. But there wasn't the tax conflict. So we put out an RFP and we got responses on all of the properties, 45 responses on all of the properties. And the entities that were not only the low bidder, but also were the right, based on other factors that lowest responsible. Lowest responsible. Yes, thank you. That is the right.
Well said.
So it's the same program essentially that we would have done with the city, which was state funding at the front end, sale, transfer to some of the atmosphere. We have mortgage from headquarters and then developers after that.
All right. Thank you. It's moved in second. Are there any questions? I do have a question,
Yes.
only because I see a name on here that may get questioned.
Well, these are employees of those, these are contractors of the land. They will not end up in ownership of any land bank property. We are paying them to do it. So,
Okay.
they were the lowest bid in several instances. And you cannot, use funds.
Okay, that's the question. Anything else? All right. So there's no other questions. Are we prepared to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Resolution number 25 stands approved. Lastly, but certainly not least, the treasurer's and cash disbursements report.
This would be really quick, because there's not much going on this month. Disbursements, we have 3. So there were 2 reimbursements to land bank staff, one to Brian for $526 for the land bank summit lodging. One to Maritza for $13.80 for supplies for showings. And then a payment to the city for minimum bids related to 5 acquisitions from the county Freeport closure. 229. Flipping over to the treasurer's report, there was no revenue on the month. And the expenses are the same as on the first.
Thank you for that. Is there any other business that come before the land bank board?
There's one thing in the web for the strategic planning, or, I'm sorry, which is out until, it's open until November 1st, so.
Oh, wonderful.
Directly to our web.
Awesome, great.
We sent that to our listserv
And-
partners.
Okay, great. Give a motion to adjourn if there's no other business. Second.
Oh, Cosmic, yes.
All in favor?
I have.
Look at you people, professionals.
Oh,
Wow, that was good.
4 o'clock.
That was o'clock. I know. And the next meeting will be after the foreclosure auction, and hopefully we'll give you some preliminary results on our.
Ooh, yeah.
Dylan, you think how to
Espérate, espérate.
Great stuff. Yes, I have.